Okay, so this is the rewarding open science, team science and collaboration session organized by NVO. Thank you very much for joining us. We are your moderators for this session. I am Maria Cruz. I am a policy advisor in the area of open science at NVO. And Hans de Jonge, my colleague, is also here on the screen, is the head of open science policies. We are organizing and moderating this session. Our colleague Amarette Rousseau, she works with us in our team at the Executive Board Office of NVO. She just disappeared, but she's doing the technical hosting of this session. So we are talking today about team science, open science, and collaboration. Just a few definitions to start us off. We just came off, or many of you probably also were at the session, at the panel discussion about teamwork. I have a definition of team science from Virginia Tech in the US. Team science is a collaborative effort to address a scientific challenge that leverages the strengths and expertise of professionals trained in different fields. Like Paul Bosley said in the previous session, the starting point is the collective. And as our minister said, it's about ticking all the boxes collectively. So it's not about one individual. Ticking all the boxes is a way to do science where each member has their own talent and skills, but collectively you need to tick all the boxes. Open science is the practice of science in such a way that others can collaborate and contribute. And it's anchored in the values of collaboration and sharing. Open science increases scientific collaboration and sharing of information about the benefits of science and society. So we're going to talk about all these themes: team science, open science, and collaboration. In December 2020, NVO, Hans and I, we launched the Open Science Fund, which was aimed at supporting researchers to develop, test, and implement innovative ways of making research open, accessible, transparent, and reusable. It was also a funding instrument that was designed to reward and recognize and incentivize researchers for their open research practices. The application forms included an open science track record question. So the track record in open science was part of the evaluation of the grant. And we also assessed the quality of the team and the quality and composition of the team. Did the team had all the skills needed to complete the project? Did the team collectively tick all the boxes needed to complete the project? It was a very, very successful program. There was a lot of interest. We received 167 eligible applications. We assessed 167 applications. And in October last year, we announced the 26 projects that were awarded funding for the Open Science Fund. And today we are going to hear from 3 projects, which I can say they are the embodiment of the values of open science, team science, and collaboration. All these 3 projects have a very strong community engagement component. You will soon see these colleagues here up on stage. We'll hear from these projects in this order. We will hear from all the projects in succession. They will give short talks. We'll hear from them in the next 20 to 25 minutes. And after we've heard from all the speakers, we will have a question and answer and discussion session moderated by my colleague Hans de Jonge. Very important to ask questions, and you may add your questions during the presentations. The questions will be addressed at the end, not after each talk, but at the end of all the talks. But please do not use the chat function on the right, but the question and answers button on the left side of the screen, you will see a little balloon with the question mark. Please put your questions there. And the reason we are using this function is because it allows participants to upvote questions, and we will try our best. We will prioritize the most voted questions during the question and answering and discussion session. So please do not use the chat, use the button. Please feel free to add questions at any time when you're listening to a talk. And if your question is addressed to a particular speaker, please write the name of the speaker. Please write, this is a question for so-and-so, so then we know, my colleague Hans will know to whom he needs to address the question. So back to our speakers today, we will have Joachim Goedhart from the University of Amsterdam talking about his project, Strengthening the Foundations of Open Science Practices at Amsterdam Science Park Study Group. Then we'll hear from Serkan Girgin from Twente University and Connie Clare from the 4TU Center for Research Data talking about their project, Integration of Interactive Research Environments to Data Repositories to facilitate fair data management practices, Jupiter Fair. And finally, we'll hear from Sanli Fayez from Utrecht University on his project, Fair Battery Knowledge Base. So I'm calling Joachim to the stage to present his project. Welcome, Joachim. I will close my presentation and I will leave the stage for now. Thank you.
See if I can get the presentation. Yeah, so this seems to work. So first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. I'm really pleased that I can share what we're doing in the Amsterdam Science Park study group. So our idea is to, what we're actually doing is to build a community of computational biologists. We share knowledge, good practices, and this then in the end will promote open science as well. So, as I said, we're a group of biologists, basically, at the University of Amsterdam. And I just want to first look a bit about the current situation in biology. And here's a nice graph showing the cumulative number of data sets. And it's a logarithmic scale and how this has been growing over the years. So for a long time, the volume of data has been exponentially growing, especially owing, for instance, to protein structures that were solved. But what you also see that since 2007, there's an additional growth of data due to DNA sequencing technology. This is really causing an explosion of data in this field. And this is partly due to the speed, because initially it took 13 years to sequence a full human genome, and this can now be done within a day. So that kind of explains this explosion of data. And not shown on this graph is also bioimaging technology, which also adds large volumes of data. And now this poses a considerable challenge, because there is a skill gap, at least that's what we observe, between what biologists learn in courses versus what is really needed for their research. So we have the situation where a nice grant is awarded to these two PIs. They have big vision, gathering lots of data, and then we have these very enthusiastic early career researchers who have to carry out this task. But they have little training in data-related skills. And of course, then a lot of things could go wrong. For instance, spending a lot of time in setting up all kind of analysis pipelines, data loss, using wrong statistical models or wrong experimental designs. Also, there is little training yet in universities about data and code sharing. So these things need to be addressed in our view. And so the answer to that is team science, and that's what we try to do with the Amsterdam Science Park Study Group. It's really a bottom-up initiative. And this is just showing you the composition of the study group. So we act as a pool of experts with diverse expertise and backgrounds. And we also have people from different career stages, so assistant professors, but also research technicians. And we also used to have PhD students within the board, but this turned out to be a bit of a challenge because PhD students are under a lot of time pressure. So nowadays we have a group of more permanent staff members. Okay, so the goal of the study group is to support students and early career researchers, and we try to provide a safe environment where they can learn about these things that are needed to carry out their research. So we organize workshops about version control, data management, fair data, all these things that are important for good data science practices. And in the end, we will, with all these initiatives, promote open science as well. And so, thanks to this grant from NWO, we can strengthen our study group. It allows us to organize workshops, organize summer school. We will also become a silver member of the Carpentries Foundation, which then will increase the pool of local instructors, which is very important, of course. And then I also want to address some of the challenges that we encounter. So finding new members for our study group, that has been a bit of that still is a bit of a challenge. Also, building a community during COVID has been a big challenge. It's kind of impossible. So over the last 2 years, of course, new PhD students have started, but it's quite hard to reach them. And so hopefully this will be improved in the next year, where we can have in-person workshops again, hopefully. Then also the balance between visibility and our activities. So, of course, we need good visibility within the institute to reach the people that can take advantage of our expertise. On the other hand, if we become too visible, this may also give us a lot of pressure on our workload. So it's quite a challenge to balance this well. And finally, we want to also reward active participation in the study group. So we're thinking of offering subscription to courses, pay for meetings, and also award prizes for early career researchers that use open science practices during their research. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And now I have to...
And we'll have next, perfectly on time, thank you very much. We'll have Serkan and Connie presenting. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria and Hans, for this kind invitation for us to present our project. My name is Serkan Girgin. I'm the head of the Center of Expertise in Big Data Science at Faculty ITC University of Twente. And together with Connie Clary, who is the community manager of 40 Research Data, we will present our NWO Open Science Project Jupiter Fair, and we will also talk about team and community aspects. The motivation of our project comes from mainly two problems. The first one is about publishing research data. During our research, we produce different kind of data. So input data sets, intermediate data sets, and of course, the final results. And usually, data production is also an iterative process. So we have different versions of this data and data sets. But however, the data publication and sharings most of the time happens only at the end of the research. Due to this, the intermediate data, which might be in fact useful for others, is not shared. And also due to time pressure, metadata, which is very important for reusability and reproducibility, is not always provided in a complete way. Manual data production really takes a lot of time and effort. Another problem, the second problem that we have, is related to the environment where we generated the data. Virtual and interactive research environments are more in use in all scientific departments for research purposes, and they significantly, in fact, facilitated research and research data production. Currently, such platforms are, in fact, well connected with some infrastructure that supports open science principles, such as code repositories, to which the researchers can easily upload their code, update it, and also keep track of its history. But unfortunately, the same situation is not the case with data repositories, and virtual research environments are not connected well to research data repositories. There might be some solutions to these problems, of course. The solution that we propose is a seamless integration of computing platforms and research data repositories. If such a integration happens, it will allow direct transfer of data from where it's generated, the computing platforms, to the final place where they will reside, the research data repositories, with less manual intervention, less data input through forms or user interfaces. It is possible to generate some of the metadata directly on the computing platforms by using the computing facilities that are available. And also, some data quality checks can also be performed before the data is uploaded to the data repository on-site on the computing platform. With this kind of functionalities, in fact, it will be much more easier, and it will take much more less time and effort to publish the data sets, not only by the researchers, but at the same time, the data stewards and curators who need to assess the data sets and to check the quality can also do their jobs in a much more easy and shorter time. This will result in more frequent data sharing practices at various stages of research life cycle and result in improved data quality of shared data. Our project, in fact, aims to realize this by developing a Jupyter Lab extension, which allows taking snapshot of research data and publishing it in a data repository in an easy way. For this purpose, we will first develop a generic methodology which aims to integrate computing platforms to research data repositories, how it can be done in an efficient and easy way. Then we will implement this methodology as a modular and expandable open source software, which we call Jupyter Fair. The methodology and the software will be deployed to a functional data repository, in this case, 40 research data and a computing platform, ITC's Geospatial Computing Platform. And the users will be able to use the system, test it, and provide their feedback as well. In order to support the community, we will also provide technical and practical documentation and end-user training.
Thanks, Serkan. So a large part of our project is actually built around this theme of collaboration and team science. So we realized that by providing this integration between Jupyter Lab and 40 research data, we'll be able to lower the barrier for researchers and reduce those manual steps to enable them to create and publish fair data, so data that's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But of course, we also realize that having this technical infrastructure on its own isn't enough to be able to help researchers make their data fair. So we really need to work with people. We need to work with the research communities, and we need to work with data support staff so that we can really encourage the use of this integration. And I think a really good place to start is looking at our cross-institutional and multidisciplinary team that are working on this project. So we've got myself, who is a community manager. We also have Serkan, who you've just heard from, who is a researcher. But we're also working with Jose and Manuel, who are research software engineers based at TU Delft's Digital Competence Centre. And I think one of the reasons why our proposal was actually successful with this Open Science Fund is because we actually bring valuable skills. We're from very different backgrounds, and we have the essential collective skills, ticking all the boxes, as Maria said, to really be able to take this project forward and also tackle a scientific challenge. And our collaborative efforts go beyond our immediate team. So we're going to be consulting researchers. So as Serkan mentioned, these are the user community of the geospatial computing platform. There's already 700 users of that platform. And we'll also be participating with the 4TU research data community. And we have more than 8,000 data sets within that data repository at the moment. And then in addition to that, we'll be collaborating with data supporters. So this will include the 4TU research data technical team, as well as the data stewards from the 4TU partner institutions. And since this project was actually funded and it's been showcased publicly, we have had other organizations that are also interested in implementing this integration within their own setting. So why is community so important for this particular project? There are various phases of our project that will involve the community from the beginning. So system design and analysis will be developing a methodology that is really driven by the user needs. So we need to be transparent from the onset and involve the researchers and the user community so that we can develop a methodology that can be reused and reproduced by various other communities. And when we deploy this system within the geospatial computing platform, we're going to be inviting researchers and larger communities to be able to test drive the development. So this means we'll be transparent in our plan from the onset, and we'll invite the community members to actually provide us with user feedback along the way. They can contribute to the development, correct problems, and also improve the technical features. And then finally, at the dissemination phase, we'll be providing documentation, tutorials, training and workshops, as well as blogs to educate the community about this work and to support its widespread use and adoption, so that hopefully this project is sustainable in the long term. And I think that's really key to think about community, because once this funding ends, the community will have to be able to drive the project, contribute and take this project forward so it's long lasting in the future. And then just a final point, just based on my own experience as a community manager, is that the road ahead isn't going to be easy. Community building, collaboration, and team science is actually a challenge. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes specific skills, but it is the way forward, we believe, for better and more open science. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and we can hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Connie. Yes, thank you very much. The next speaker is Sanli. Thanks, you're already here. Thank you very much.
Shall I start? Oh yeah, I think I should. Maybe I can also share my. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Maria and Hans, for giving me this opportunity to present this talk. I think I'm going to take it over from the part that actually Connie left, and I see that as a nice bridge to my talk, which is a little bit also about how to, some experience I have and some of the observations I had about how to actually engage in team, or I would like to call it also open teams and of open science. So my name is Salih Faez from Utrecht University, and I'm going to talk about the Fair Battery project, but also generally how are we going to set up teams for such a big project, and you will see why it's big. Maybe I should start from saying that why am I actually in academia, and if everybody does that, perhaps we can have a more civil and open discussion. And also it's clear why I do the things I do for myself. And here are my reasons. They might be mundane for some of you. I have two reasons, mainly. Two main reasons. One of them is I would like to invent something that obtains more than 1 million users. And I have said it many times in many places. This is my main academic goal. And the second one is for me to make academia, my working, the system I really love to contribute to, a more attractive place than what it is now for my daughter's generation. I should be careful here because Paul said we should not call generations, but you understand what I'm talking about. So, and that's actually why I personally engage in open science because the open science and team science are, for me, the best, give me the best chances to bring these goals forward and make it possible. So I have 7 suggestions for choosing and leading an open project, which I have also given in other places. And these are the 7, connecting to what Connie just mentioned. If I had maybe 20 minutes, I would have gone into all of them, but I have only 8 or now 6. So I'm going to explain mostly on the two red ones, but maybe I can just read them here, except for one that is about community, understanding it. It's very important to have really an admirable grand vision, and not every project maybe can become open. It's very important to have a structure. I really recommend reading the Joe Freeman's essay on tyranny of structurelessness. It's good to choose an altruistic team, and it is proven by game theory, but also evolutionary sociology, that altruistic teams win over individualistic teams, even though inside the teams, usually competitive people take advantage of the others. But as a whole, as a team, altruistic teams are going to win. And you can see that, for example, in population of ants or zebras or other animals. You don't have to start from scratch. There is a lot of experience out there. And if you start from scratch, probably you haven't done your homework well. You should get in touch with users. This can be the users of your product, but also the users of your community, the members of your community at an earlier stage. Connie just mentioned why it's important. And as a fun part, you also have to have a good motto. It really, I think, helps a lot. So I want to emphasize 2 of them. And this is not one of the suggestions, just an observation. It's a fact that open source, open science doesn't mean free labor. And there's evidence for it, for example, from open software library, that only like 20%, it's a very difficult graph to read, don't try, but only like 17% of the open source software still has a contribution 1 year after it has been launched, or it has been posted on this website. This is a library of open software. And only half of them actually have a team of 2. So most of them are also not teamwork. And there are some things to pay attention to, that just leaving your code open or making your efforts open doesn't mean that everybody is sort of falling in line to contribute to it. And for the successful projects, I think one of the things I observe and I really emphasize is very important is you have to understand what are the community interactions. A lot of things that Serkan and Joachim just mentioned, they are examples of community interactions inside an open community. It can be just an unofficial exchange, but it can also be, paid work is also an interaction. And it's so important to understand these things to make a sustainable community go forward. And there are resources for it. This is one example from Mozilla. You can read, but they are very good examples of how to engage with community and also use these community interactions to make your work go sustainable. So read about it. The other suggestion I had is really have to get in touch with users at a very, very early stage, because you want to create something which people want to use if you are really going for impact. And this is a very, very nice example of this 3D printed prothèse. If people are not going to use it, if the nurses are not going to train themselves, this would have been not a useful project. But the fact that this project is now happening worldwide is an indication of the people who are behind it, the leaders of it, really understanding what the users really want. And this was the spirit that we had behind our FAIR battery project, which is bigger than the knowledge base, which was granted by MVO. And a FAIR battery stands really for having an electrochemical battery that is findable for people, can reproduce it. It's open hardware. They can also have elements of it interoperable, so people can engage and do in different parts in combination with each other. We want many people to use it. I'm talking about billions. And that's why we would like to deliberately use low cost and locally available material. And we also need to set up education communities. At the moment, this is the biggest bottleneck for the energy transition. The people who want to install these things and maintain them, they are absent. So in acknowledging that, we teamed up not only with engineers, we have engineers in our team, but also with the anthropologists and development economics who go actually work in these communities and study why do people actually use electricity at all, and why does it make sense to have a certain village in Africa, for example, have a grid, and what goes wrong. And this we have to do from the very early stage. And this, I think, one of the strengths of our group, which is larger than the people who were on the grant, because the grant said only 4 people. And that's a funny observation. Maybe as one before last slide, the leadership was mentioned. And I think if you want to engage in open leadership, you also have to educate yourself about how open teams or distributed leadership functions. And this is one of the books that I strongly recommend to everybody to read. And this is a quote from the book Reinventing Organization, that consciously or unconsciously leaders put in place organizational structures, practices, and cultures that make sense to them. And that corresponds to their way of dealing with the world. And this is also one of my basic principles when I want to judge if a certain scheme or certain organization is going to actually do the open science the way I understand open science, to look what the leaders say and what the leaders act and what the structures they have in place. And I would suggest that also the funding organizations look at that, look at the actual structures and the practices of the leaders. To get concrete, maybe for the discussion of today, I have 3 suggestions to funding open science projects. The first thing is that, yeah, intentions are very good, and we are very used to value promises and ideas, but looking at the structures in place is even a better indicator for finding out. There must be, of course, room for newcomers to come, but generally you should not forget also to observe what has happened in the project. And I'm not talking about individuals, but really the project which you want to grant. It's very important to support maintenance, as Connie also was mentioned, or at least a graceful exit. If you have a 100,000 project and the next year it has to stop abruptly, it's also 100,000 loss for the funding organization. So if there is a possibility to have a small annexation just to make it remain in some limited capacity to continue, I would say it's equally also the responsibility of the funding agency for its efficiency to look at to that graceful exit, let's call it. And open leadership is a trainable skill. It's not coming with not 1 workshop or 2, but it is trainable, and there are a lot of resources that we should pay attention to. I can give, for example, suggestion. There's a 16-week program of Mozilla you can follow. And community coordination, as Connie mentioned, is a real job, and not everybody is skilled with it, but we should really always keep job for it. And with that, I actually stop. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Sanli. Really inspiring talk. And also thanks to Joachim, Connie, Serkan. I'd like to invite you all back to the stage. If you could turn on your cameras again, then we will see your faces again. And because we are moving into the next phase of this session, where we actually are going to answer the questions also from the audience. As Maria said, please make use of the Q&A function at the left of your screen, and don't use the chat function because we don't use that. And please feel free to ask any questions you might have to our wonderful speakers of this session. I already saw some good questions coming in, but maybe to start off the discussion in connection to something you ended with, and which also was brought up, I think, by Connie very clearly in your presentation. I think all of you have said that team science is a skill. It requires attention. It's sometimes very hard. It costs time. Maybe even requires training. It's not something that comes natural, maybe. could you all briefly say something about what you did yourselves in your project that you just presented to build that team? What did you do on team building within the project that you just presented? Who can I give the floor first? Serkan.
Well, yeah, you are right, Hans. Actually, we cannot expect all these qualifications from the project lead, and in fact, it's the team that is the important thing. So the team formation is very important from that point of view. So eventually, we recognize all the need, especially for this open science or open source project, the importance of the community. So you should have people having that experience in the team. This is something very important. So we should not focus only the scientific excellence or scientific aspects. We should also really consider everything together, and we should look from team point of view and make sure that people are impact in the team.
Joachim? Connie, sorry. Yeah, please.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, just following on from what Serkan's just said. I mean, from my own perspective, I do think the team science and collaboration is a skill. And as Stanley mentioned, there are a lot of different courses available and different programs that you can actually become a bit better equipped. But I think within our immediate team, I think we all value each other's positions and different skills and expertise. And I think just finding the space together to brainstorm and to develop our ideas, because I think with our project, it's about providing the community as well as your own team, but also the community of users with some kind of structure, again, as Stanley said, and giving them a purpose and making sure that the goals of the project are clear and that you share the same mission and vision. I think that's really important. And sometimes that doesn't come naturally immediately, and it might require somebody to coordinate or take the lead and become an open leader. And it doesn't always have to be a community manager, but someone that has the skills to make those connections, bring people together at the early stage, also to identify and capitalize on the strengths of the team and the community, and then create the space for inclusion and growth. I think that's really important. And also just to be aware that as communities and teams evolve, that those opportunities change as well over time, you know, from the inception phase to like establishment and then to maturity of the project. It requires a lot of hard work to keep this going, and it's not going to be the same kind of activities. So I think that just shows how difficult it can be.
Yeah, thanks. Brilliant. Yeah. Joachim?
Yeah. So in my case, the team already existed, so it was kind of easy for me. It was actually a team of 3 PhD students with which it started. And then they invited permanent staff also to join that team. And I think it's important, of course, to make newcomers feel at home. And yeah, just communicate a lot about the expectations. And so it basically started with invitations for drinking coffee and then talking a lot about goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Thanks.
That's very important.
Sonli, do you want to add something?
Yes, if I may. I have a couple of recommendations there or observations. One thing I can mention, of course, the resources are important, but for example, circulation of information is very important. And this is something you can check if the documentation is there, if somebody who joins at the middle of the project can still function fully, then the team is well structured. The same for the circulation of roles. If you see always the same person presenting the work of even a successful team, probably there is something not very well organized in that team it's so dependent on a single person. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the things that I see happening, but also there is self-reflection. And this is again something you can check in the software community, but more and more also in data community. You can see if a good README for a repository is a very good indication of how inviting that team is, but also a template issue. If somebody wants to know the first contribution, what that person has to do. These are indications of if the team has paid attention to lowering the barrier, or if there is any indication of what can be my first contribution, the 5-minute contribution. Successful teams have these practices, and these are the things that even an external observer can in half an hour really see if that team has thought about these things or not.
Interesting, thank you. I'm looking at the Q&A box. Another invitation to our audience. We have 85 people present here. Do not shy away. Fire your questions on our audience. Actually, there's a very interesting one for Joachim. Joachim, how easy or difficult it was or is the multidisciplinarity of the group in terms of different underlying research assumptions, communication, understanding each other, etc. So we have seen the team composition of your project, indeed very different backgrounds. How easy or difficult is that to collaborate?
Yeah, I think so that the backgrounds and expertise are very diverse. So one is an expert in R, the other prefers to use Python, for instance. But we also have a common ground, right? So we're kind of like-minded people who all see the benefit of open science. I think Sonli mentioned altruism. I think we kind of gathered altruistic people. They are more likely to join this effort, I think. So, and that the expertise is very diverse. I think that's a benefit, right? So if we have, we organize trainings, they can be diverse. They can be topics in Python, it can be R, it can be version control. So of course we make an inventory of what is required, but we can address a lot of different aspects that are related to open science.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the questions, a question for Sonli: what skills are important for community coordination? I'm directing it first to you, but I also want to know the answer from Connie later on.
Yes, I think Connie is the expert there. What I can say, that's what I've learned in the Mozilla program, for example. I would say understanding the value exchange is perhaps one of the most important things. Understanding all the terms, having empathy for the people who interact. Depends how open your team you want, but you really have to understand why people should do or should think like match with your shared goal in your team. And this is very important. And there are skills for it. In Mozilla, they talk about the mountain of engagement. You should always ask, if one person is just reading my website, it's already an engagement. But if somebody else, also comes and every day takes a backup, it's another form of engagement. Why people get more and more engaged, and how can I sort of use this sort of wider community of interested people and then add to their engagement so that the project moves forward? What value exchanges do I have to pay attention? These are the things that a community coordinator can do a lot. Mm-hmm. Very good. Connie.
Thanks, Sonli. Thank you. Yeah, it's quite a challenging question in a way, because there are a lot of different skills, and often I think they're quite invisible skills, because sometimes there are other people in the team that you're giving the floor to do the work and actually push things forward. So a lot of it can just be facilitation of connections. And I think, as Stanley said, understanding is really important, and listening, because often as a community manager, and particularly in this project, I'm not technical. So I don't have a lot of the technical expertise and skills that Serkan, Jose and Manuel have. So I think it's understanding that as a community coordinator, you're not there to actually, facilitate all the roles and tick all the boxes, but you're there to actually listen to the people within the team. Also, I think it's important, to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and provide a safe space for people to feel like they can contribute safely. Also, I think providing clear goals and purpose from the start, because that will provide people with an opportunity to engage meaningfully. They'll come and they'll get some benefit out of the community. So thinking, why should they be a part of your community? Giving them a reason to be there, that they actually get something out of it as well as contribute something. I think having this mutual benefit is also important. And I think as well, some of the other skills, apart from listening and understanding and providing opportunities for networking, is also, I think Stanley's also touched upon this today, is communications and documentation, and actually sharing and advocacy, sharing what you're doing, raising awareness of what you're doing is also part of that role as well. So I think it's quite a diverse and varied role, and often different depending on the community as well.
Yeah. And maybe a follow-up question also, Connie. So you're community manager. I think many people would consider that a support staff role. You're based in, or at least employed by VTU Data Center in Delft. Often when we talk about team science, it's also about that divide between research staff and support staff. Is there enough reward and recognition for, well, community management staff such as you, and what, and if not, what can we do about it?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people would probably say no, and that there isn't much reward and recognition at times for support staff. I think the community manager role is still quite a young role, and it's evolving over time. But I think certainly we need to place more emphasis on reward and recognition for support staff. This is my experience. Often support staff are critical in a research environment, not recognised enough, and we've already heard about this collective team. So it's important to value each member. And I think that already with this NVO Open Science Fund, it's a good place to start, providing funding opportunities for multidisciplinary teams that involve support staff. So we're talking data managers, data stewards, research software engineers, community managers. So not just researchers, because a lot of the calls are open just explicitly to researchers. But of course, support staff have these wonderful ideas and are often from an academic background, sometimes themselves as well, so can have that empathy and also contribute. So I think that already this particular fund is really great. And then hopefully in turn, the more this happens and the more researchers and support staff come together, there should be hopefully less of a divide. And we'll see the value in working with each other more and more. So I think that is a really good place to start. Funding organisations can start thinking about collaborative projects more. And also from the funding organisation's perspective, they should get better value for money, essentially, because maybe the work will be done more efficiently. There's a diverse skill set, so things can be done to maybe higher quality with having this multidisciplinary team. And on top of that, I think this was mentioned in earlier presentations today, support for maintaining this kind of collaborative work as well. So obviously once a project's funded and it's complete, often the support staff roles are required to actually continue the project. Yeah. So making sure that funds are available for hiring of personnel in support roles that can continue these projects, I think is very important, because voluntary communities are often very difficult to sustain in the long term.
Yeah. Thanks, great, brilliant, good advice. We'll try to find a solution for that. Serkan, you want to react?
Yeah, I think that's very important. And if you can provide such a support, I think it will be really very influential, because eventually we can not, of course, people do very nice things voluntarily because they also think that like Stanley does, they are also useful for the community in general. But sometimes you may need some funding to organize some events, for example, or you may need an infrastructure in place so that you can provide a service like that. And the way right now to have that kind of funding is either apply another research proposal, so wait for the result, and it takes time, or you should have the support of your own institution. Which may have a different vision or, in fact, mandate, for example. And in that case, it becomes really difficult. And funding agencies, I believe, can really help with that.
Yeah. Well, we have already started thinking about the next round of also actually this Open Science Fund, and these are indeed questions we are thinking about. No decisions taken yet, but we are aware of the difficulties, of course. I see a very interesting question, another interesting question for Sunli in the question box. I think all of you have touched upon altruism. You've created very nice, open, collaborative, altruistic teams. But the question is, how do you evaluate the team collaboration? Altruistic is beautiful, but is it realistic in the competitive academic world we're living in, Sunli?
Yeah, I can react to that. I don't think there's any contradiction between altruism and competition. It is exactly the competition aspect that when you come to the team level, if you have an altruistic team, a team made of more altruistic people, it wins the competition. And then you can see that in the fields, disciplines, I don't know, high energy physics wins over plasma physics, for example, or in the grants you see astronomy are really good and in taking each other's back, and the other communities are not. So if they are altruistic, actually they just win in the competition. That's one thing. How to evaluate it? Again, you can, of course, as Paul said, talk to people. That's the easy part, how the experiences, but you can also look at the structures in place. And it was especially emphasize the really written, documented structures and the roles. Are the roles clear? Are they circulating? Is it dependent on one person or many people? Is there an onboarding process available? You can just, as an evaluator, say, yeah, I want to contribute a day, and what should it's very similar to evaluating a company you want to, work for life in. You would like to go inside and see how this is set up, and I think that's one easy way of evaluating team collaboration, to look at the structures in place and not what the leaders say or what the marketing person say. To give an example.
Mm-hmm. Anyone want to respond to that or add to that? No? Second, there's also a question to you in the box that has really also to do with the contents of your project.
Yes.
So you
I was typing a reply on it actually.
Okay, but maybe just take the floor.
I can directly. I think that's a good question. So because sometimes we are afraid to publish something. It can be data or something else, thinking that it's not good enough to share with the others. But in fact, it might be the opposite. So maybe not a complete, but initial data can initiate also some other ideas and can be useful for the others. From that point of view, I think a good enough decision should be made by the researcher himself. Of course, we can have some reviewers. If they are experienced about the topic, they can also help with this kind of decision. But I think we should rely on the decision of the researcher. Mm-hmm. It works nicely with the open source software, as you know. So here, all these repositories, there is no limitation about what kind of software can be deposited, and eventually the ones which are good has a community eventually.
Mm-hmm. Connie.
Yeah, just if I can add to that as well about the good enough comment as well, just that I guess data, the value of certain data and software code, I guess is a bit subjective in the sense of we don't know who yet could reuse it. So I guess if it's talking about data quality specifically, the integration will be with 4TU research data, which is the data repository that ultimately the data and software code will be deposited in. So from that metadata and data quality perspective, there are data curators that work for 4TU research data as part of the team who will be like a quality control exercise, making sure that the metadata record is complete. And because we have this integration, hopefully that will help to solve some of those issues as well on the data curation side, that the data will be in a sustainable format, that the metadata is complete as possible to make it as fair as possible. But from the perspective of whether or not the data is good enough to be reused, I guess is somewhat subjective, and we won't know immediately how it will be reused and by who.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. clear. So I'm seeing another question. It's about the well-known, or at least to some known credit system, which is used to describe team and team contributions in the publishing world. And Anneke Meijer is asking whether some of you or all of you make use of that to make the contributions of your teams visible in your publications. Anyone who wants to comment or answer to that? Do you know the system? Sandy?
Yes, I know the system. I mean, for this project, we still do not have a formal publication or output that does need an the archaic author list. If possible, I try to avoid it and always come back. There's many more layers to contributions than just that certain product. But I have used it in my publications, and interesting because the discussion of internationalizations also was mentioned today. I have Chinese collaborators, and when we collaborate on a paper, they say, "Oh, can we please be last author or first author, because those are the only ones that count." Even those people, when I say, "Okay, let's use the credit system," say, "Yeah, of course," and that they totally open for it, and it helps avoid a lot of ugly discussions.
Absolutely, yeah. Anyone else? Joachim, do you know it? Use it?
I actually don't know this system, so I'll look into that to be aware of that. But we recently had a publication together with a PhD student and someone else. So 3 people working on a project to make some software, and we just agreed to all be corresponding authors and equally contributing.
Maybe I can say something. Well, in fact, this is mandatory for some publications. So you explicitly need to use this model, and of course, it's a good practice if it is not asked by the publishers. I think the publishers can be influential for this, and also the institutions who support the research. I think they should ask also the authors to indicate this in their publications. And if it is not there, they shouldn't allow them to publish, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at the time, because we're also, I think, approaching the end of the session. I do have one last question. So this fund was also really intended and designed to give recognition and rewards to you guys who are leading on open science. If you could, or few of you could say how important receiving this grant for you is right now, and for your team, what would you answer then? Who wants to take the floor? Connie.
I'll just start and then I'll let anybody else take over. So from my perspective, I think it's been absolutely instrumental for us as a team, because, already Serkan and I knew each other, and I was connected already with Jose and Manuel, but I think having this fund has actually given us the incentive and the purpose to come together and actually start work on something that we already, wanted to do and saw some merit in doing. So I think for us, it's been absolutely critical that we can dedicate the time to this project, and that we've got those funds available. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks. Great. Anyone else?
For us, it's also been extremely valuable also to gain some visibility within the university, to see that this is possible and this is important, and it will just allow us to do things, right, to organize workshops, get memberships, because we were largely unfunded, so it's really great.
I'm seeing my colleague Maria entering. Serkan, last 2 sentences, and I think then we have to really wrap up, because we're running out of time.
I think this kind of funding also provides motivation for people to come together and bring the ideas. So eventually you had more than 160 project proposals. Of course, only limited of them get supported, but that means there are that many ideas around, and maybe they can find funding from somewhere else, or maybe they can start by themselves and then at a certain stage get funded. So I think you are really pushing, which is good.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. all of you, enormous thanks on behalf of everyone for your presentations, for the good discussions, to the audience for the very interesting and inspiring questions. Since we're talking about team science, I also want to thank the organization, all the people behind the scenes that have made this session possible, and hope you will have a nice rest of the day during this conference, and hope to see you later. Thank you all.
Thanks for your hard work. It's very remarkable what you're doing it at Edinburgh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.